Alex Assaley, welcome to the Fiduciary U Podcast. Thanks for being a guest today.
Yeah, my pleasure, Josh. Thanks so much for having me.
We're going to have a fun discussion. We were just prepping before the recording started, and I think we got a lot of really good topics to touch on today. You are, I'm not sure how much we've ever competed head to head back in the day, but we're in similar proximity. You're in Northern Virginia. I was in Baltimore in the Green Spring days and whatnot, but you were always a guy that I had tremendous respect for in terms of what you had built, and just really kind of a rock star in terms of from an advisory perspective, but then a lot of the leadership that you've provided in the industry with NAPA and whatnot. So for those of you for those that may not fully know your background, why don't you just talk a little bit about your firm, how you got into the business, and what that looks like?
Sure. Obviously the respect is mutual. I remember, so I run AFS 401k Retirement Services. We're in the Washington, D.C. area, not too far away from where you are and where you built and led Green Spring, probably 60 or 70 miles or so. I remember one time we got together, this is years ago, for lunch in like
Clyde's in Columbia, right?
I was thinking about that yesterday in preparing, and I was thinking I'm pretty sure I ate a salad for that lunch, and I was like, it was kind of like the passive way to go in for a meal. I was like, I'll just have the salad, and we had a good conversation, but I don't think we were perhaps as open with each other in terms of our businesses and what we're thinking. It was one of the first times we got together, but since then we
dance. I remember that too. It was very much we're playing poker. Who's going to put their cards down on the table?
Since then we've got to know each other, I think, relatively well. And you're right. I mean, over the last 15 or 16 years, as we've both been in this business, I can't really think of an occurrence where we're actually competing with each other on a new opportunity where we're both, which is interesting in so much as we were geographically very close, but also shows just the amount of opportunity there is for retirement advisors in our industry. And so I started in 2006 at AFS. And like nearly everybody I think that I talk to, or almost everybody who tells the story of their origin, is, I kind of got into this by accident. There are components and experiences in my life that are perfect alignments, in my belief, to the work that we do as retirement advisors, helping organizations create awesome retirement plans and more importantly, helping their employees improve their financial lives. But in terms of actually getting into the business, it was somewhat luck and foresight. My business partner who hired me back then, who was my boss, had a really well-established wealth management and financial planning practice that he was growing and building. And he had a couple of retirement plans. And this was back in 2005, 2006. He had the foresight to see that it was very difficult, if not impossible, to be a great financial planner and a great retirement consultant. And to do that, you needed to have a specialization to really make a difference in the retirement plan ecosystem. You had to focus and specialize. And so he hired me, and took a risk and took a chance to try to build the retirement plan business. And for the first, I knew what 401ks were, and I knew, the smallest amount about retirement plans. And the first 24 months, I spent nearly every waking hour educating myself. And it was kind of the reverse of what the normal process is for our DCIO and vendor partners that reach out to us and try to build relationships with us. For building their own products or sort of distribution of their funds or their platform. I was calling wholesalers and saying, hey, can you meet with me and just tell me what I should be learning and what I should be reading and who I should know. And fortunately, anyway, I'm sure a lot of them thought, who's this 22-year-old kid who looks like he's 17? And is it worth spending a little bit of time with them? But fortunately, there were a handful that really, for lack of a better phrase, took me under their wing and spent a lot of time and energy mentoring me and giving me the roadmap at the time to try and build and create a business, a company that was solely focused on delivering fiduciary advice to companies and their employees within their 401k and 403b plans. Yeah,
it's so funny. I mean, that your origin story is almost identical to mine as well. We started Greenspring late 2004, early 2005. And I kind of stumbled. We were private wealth focused, and I stumbled into 401k in 2006. And I mean, the story is almost identical. Back then, the story that you were learning to tell and craft and kind of formulating your beliefs, I think that's one of the most important things for advisors is that, get a lot of advice, but ultimately, like, you have to identify and determine and think critically about like what you believe, and then, build your practice based on those beliefs. And, I remember the first 24 months, I mean, I had this differentiated story that I was kind of, iteratively building. And back then it was super differentiated, which was good because it's a lot harder to differentiate stories now. I mean, you go on websites and everybody says they do the same thing. But the challenge was it was such a different story that it was hard to tell. I remember sitting, I still look back those first couple of years, plans that I should have literally knocked out of the park, that I would like walk out of the meeting with the decision makers, and I'd sit in my car and I'd like punch the steering wheel because I'm like, how did I not communicate? Like, this is such a better mousetrap that I'm building. How did I not communicate it well? And it was easier, I think, back then because the market hadn't evolved as it was still the early days. I think it was easy to kind of like make mistakes back then and kind of learn from those mistakes just because the market hadn't started to mature over the past 5 or 7, 10 years. It's definitely accelerated. Those early years were probably a good time for you and I to get in the business because we were able to kind of make mistakes without, it's like my kids. I have 4 kids, I want to put them in a position where they can I want them to fail, but I want them to fail fast and I want them to fail forward. And I want them to fail in a way where I've still kind of constructed the boundaries so that they don't blow themselves up, if you will. And it was easier back then, I think, than it is now, where the market has just, it's evolved. And so maybe talk a little bit about how you've seen the role. You're really, I would say, very, very uncommon in the industry, because you have a tremendous amount of experience. You've got 16 years of experience, but you're only 38 years old. Not to out you on the podcast, but you're really young within the industry, but age-wise, but you've got this tremendous amount of experience because you've been doing it so long. How have you seen the role of fiduciary advisor, change, let's say, over the past 5, 7, 10 years? And how would you describe that role today and where you think it's going to evolve to over, let's say, the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, there's no question that our role has become much bigger and more expansive in serving as the go-to resource for helping an organization, helping the retirement committee around all aspects of the retirement plan. And, for our team at AFS, we embodied that really early on from day one. And that was different. Just like you were saying, our service model was different. And now we've refined it. We've enhanced the services. But, in 2006, 2007, we were thinking about fiduciary consulting, about retirement plan consulting as this full scope service model, helping a client really with anything and everything that comes up when it comes to their retirement or financial benefits. And so now you see that most, if not all, of the top advisory firms around the country are embracing or have embraced a model like that. Going back to your first point, I still think that for those who are earlier on in their career or just starting in this area of their business, there's still a big opportunity set. I mean, one of the things I think that made us very fortunate, our team and yours respectively, is that when you are first getting started, it's easier to build and refine and evolve a service model when you have 2 or 3 or 4 clients compared to 50 or 80 or 100 or 200 clients, right? To make a big change in what you're delivering or roll out a new, service initiative across 90 or so plans, that's a much bigger lift than to say, we're going to work on this with these 5 plans. And so I think that that's still an opportunity that exists today for advisors that are getting into the space. But for those who are getting into the space, I think you have to be much more hands-on, much more of an expert across these different areas, these different service lanes of a retirement plan. Whereas it was very common 15, 16 years ago that advisors could focus solely on building and maintaining high quality investment menus, and the record keepers and or TPAs would do the rest. Now it's this real collaborative process. I like to think, and this might be romanticizing it a little bit in some way, but there's a movie that came out, I guess probably now 10 or 15 years ago, called Michael Clayton with George Clooney. I don't know if you remember that movie. Awesome film. And he works for a big global high powered law firm, and he's like the fixer, and which that's not necessarily the most sort of positive type of position or role. But I tend to, again, this is like romanticizing the work that we do. I always think of like the work that we're doing as the fixer for retirement plans in an ethical and moral and aspirational way. But that our job is to be that primary driver of running a high quality, efficient, compliant, and valuable program for our clients. And when there are challenges, when there are roadblocks, when there are issues, becoming that fixer and finding ways to solve those challenges, solve those problems, and resolve them for the benefit of their employees, to create, this path so that employees can really improve their financial picture. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. I think that again, similar kind of story. I was in the early days of building Greenspring, and I don't know about you, but and again, having left earlier this year, but we had refined and honed the service model very much over time. But it still looks, the core foundation, I bet 90% of like what, when I left, we were doing for clients still looked a lot like what we were doing, I was doing in 2006, 2007, when I was kind of by myself and trying to figure it all out. Because those principles, those kind of first principles that you talk about, you were early, we were early. But I think, good process should really, in some ways, be timeless. And, trying to find, I was kind of like you, what I wanted to be was that fixer for clients, right? I wanted to be that first call. In many cases, even just being able to quarterback when issues came up, being able to kind of quarterback the process, get everybody in the room, make sure that there were open lines of communication, honest conversations, and then really kind of project management, right? Here's who's going to take this. Here's who's going to take that. This is what we're going to do. And then just make sure that those things get, I used to always say to our team, it's a pretty simple business. Just, keep your promises and do what you say you're going to do. It's not that hard. But what was interesting is when you take that more comprehensive approach, you find issues that you can kind of learn on the job. And if you've got a really good, I used to always say, you got to have a mind of an elephant. You come across an issue. I loved when we found issues that we had never come across before, because it was a really good learning experience to be able to take that and then apply that in future opportunities when we came across those issues. But when you fix or help an HR team resolve an issue, or a CFO, you build tremendous client loyalty. They don't think of you as like the 401k advisor. They think of you more as like, this is a trusted advisor to our business, that when we have issues,
right,
they help us, they help us get them resolved the right way. so that we can focus on running the business. Would you agree with that? How did your approach impact the quality and depth of your relationship with your clients?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's builds these deep, strong, and long-lasting relationships. It's also incredibly rewarding. And, I think the reason that the service model, by and large, at a macro level looks the same over a longer period of time is you use the word principles. You could call them values, but those are these, threads of our character that we believe are the absolute right thing for the clients and the investors and savers, the employees that we get the opportunity to work with. And so, these beliefs that turn into values or principles shouldn't really change. How they're delivered and perhaps the technology and the look and feel of the delivery mechanism and how we're providing that service relationship will always evolve and will always be refined. But at the core, ensuring that you have a really efficiently run retirement plan, that you're doing it in a way that's aligned and in compliance with the rules and regulations. And from our perspective, we believe the central theme of the entire, 401k or 403b construct is how you're helping employees enhance their financial know-how and giving them the tools and resources and counsel to be better educated when it comes to their money so that they can make really wise decisions for today, tomorrow, and for their long-term financial future. And our ability to deliver on that and execute on that, again, not only creates these great relationships with companies and organizations and individual investors or employees in the 401k plans, but that creates this fuel for our team where you just, it's the reward that we get to recognize of seeing the impact on how we've made a difference.
Yeah, I like to describe it as, you work for the thank yous you're never going to hear, right? In a lot of ways when it comes to participants. I don't know, you've got many tens of thousands of participants across your client base that you touch, that you impact, that you, that you both directly, but probably more indirectly influence and impact over time. You're not going to be able to know every one of those people by name. But that's one of the coolest things about this business is that you can do a lot of good, you can do well, but you can really magnify. That's why I got in the 401k side. I loved our wealth side. I have tremendous respect, and we'll talk a little bit about this later on, I think, in the show. But for the private client side of the business, but one of the things that really attracted me to 401k was I was like, maybe I could influence 50 or 75 families on the private client side, but I literally could impact tens of thousands of people by really helping committees. That was my big thing early on because it was just me. Probably like when you started out, right? We were chief cook and bottle washer. We did everything, and I just didn't have the bandwidth. I didn't have the capacity to do a lot of one-on-one participant stuff. And so the approach I took, and I know it was similar with you, was if I can influence the 3 to 5 to 7 committee members who kind of make all the decisions that are going to impact their employees, I get a lot of leverage. I get a lot of scale. I influence 3 to 5 people that are responsible for 100 or 200 or 500 people. There's a really, really big impact from that perspective. So you really got onto this kind of financial wellness thing, I think, early on from the advisory side. I actually had the chance to interview Liz Davidson from Financial Finesse this summer, who was awesome. And I called her the OG of financial wellness. I think she coined the term like in 1999 or 2000. But you were early on to this, and you built a couple of really cool things. So you built, I think, your own customized wellness solution called Money Nav. Then you do these awesome money hacks, which essentially are like these really good videos, high quality videos on different topics. What number? I mean, it's got to be over 100 money hacks. Well, where are you?
Not quite. So we started Money Hacks in 2019. I want to say we were doing some other video content before that, but we officially started the Money Hacks theme or brand in 2019. And we're getting ready to touch 100. I think we're in the high 80s right now. So if I can crank a few more out here before the end of the year, maybe we'll get to 100. Our goal was to do 26 a year, basically one every other week. And so we're pretty much on track. We're a little ahead of track, actually. And the idea is that, so the Money Hacks videos that a lot of folks see on LinkedIn or Twitter or other social platforms are these anywhere from 1 to the longest might end up being around 4-minute videos on various topics that are curated out of all the conversations and questions that we get in our one-on-one coaching sessions. And some are time sensitive or timely based on what's happening in sort of the news around personal finance. Others are these questions we get over and over about, should I do pre-tax or Roth, or why do I even need to update a beneficiary? Or, what should my investment allocation look like? So it's our way of trying to dispel some of the assumed complexities that exist in personal finance and make it really simple, down to earth, and aspirational, and deliver it in a medium that is easy for somebody to access and consume. But the very quick backstory there, I've talked about this before, and it's in sort of different videos that we put together. I grew up in West Virginia, in Southern West Virginia, and had a wonderful, wonderful childhood. I played a lot of sports. I know you were an athlete, college baseball player, right?
Long time ago, about 40 pounds ago.
We can get out on the men's league, maybe this weekend and see.
That trick hammy will come out. I'm not sure that's a good idea. Getting old.
So I had a really, almost like Norman Rockwell type childhood, frankly. I mean, it wasn't all, there were periods that were challenging. My parents got divorced when I was a kid. But it was a great, they remained very amicable and friendly. But when I was 17 years old, my father unexpectedly passed away. And as hard as that was and traumatizing as that was, he was also really the primary sort of financial manager of our family. And it was a real shock to the system. And over the course of the next couple of years, at 17, 18 years old, just like the vast majority of kids going through high school and into college, you don't learn a lot about your money, finances and how to manage money and how to make good financial decisions. But I also realized that, my mother, who's an awesome mom and just, gave me everything as a child, wasn't really good at managing money and understanding cash flow and budgeting and all those sort of things.
And she was thrust into this position, right?
Right. Yeah. And so that was, there was a lot of financial stress and financial worry in our household. And so, but to be honest, we're probably better off than a lot of families that, around the country. So, but over the next couple of years, as I went to school and was in college, I that continued, that persisted. But I also realized that a lot of people face the same thing every single day. In fact, there are a lot of households, a lot of families where neither of the, parents really have a good handle on financial literacy or financial know-how. And so I started to get more interested in the financial services industry while I was in college. I had some exposure to it. My father was actually in financial services industry. My uncle still is today. But you see the guitars. I thought I was going to do something else, like maybe play music or something more sort of artistic, or play sports. But I kind of wasn't. I'm only 5'10", maybe if I was in like a stat sheet, they'd give me 5'11". You know how they do that up a little bit. But anyways, so as I found this retirement plan, this 401k industry, the ability to help people who will never have their own financial advisor, never have their own personal financial advisor, to be able to deliver education and guidance and advice to them in a way that can make a profound impact on their lives and their families' lives was just this, incredible opportunity and an incredible experience that like really kind of aligned right with my heart, right. and where like I thought, okay, this has a lot of sort of symmetry with what I've experienced and where I think, I can make a difference. And so even very early on in growing AFS 401k and trying to grow AFS 401k, we collectively centered around that mission of financial education, what is now, defined as financial wellness. And we're delivering that in 2007 and 2008. And that's evolved significantly. We spent probably a 9 or 10 year period looking at all of the different tools and platforms and financial wellness solutions and technology and fintech out there. And there's a lot of great solutions. And I think one of the things that we'll get into a little bit, I think, is that I don't believe there's only one way to do this. I don't believe that there's only one platform, that one is better than the other. I think what Liz Davidson has built at Financial Finesse is incredible. I think that, things like Educate and Smart Dollar, I'm, giving some free press to all these different fintech solutions or financial wellness solutions. I think there's this, we can all coexist because they all can play a role that delivers on my mission, which is helping more people than ever before improve their financial know-how and have access to a partner, to an advocate that will put them on the path to improve their financial life and create and gain financial security. As we analyze all these different platforms and all these different financial wellness solutions.
That's a baller mission, by the way, too, just to be able to for advisors listening, you better step your game up if you compete against Alex and AFS, because if he's in there telling that story that way, that's going to be tough to beat.
Well, the cool thing is that I think that there are a lot of things that make me unique, but there are a lot of advisors that have their own stories and experiences that are doing the same thing. I mean, there's, when I talk to our peers and colleagues, I think the vast majority of advisors in our industry have this real big heart and belief to help people. And that's really incredible. And all these other things that we do follow that.
And it's really that personal story, and I really appreciate you sharing your backstory, because I think that's ultimately, the business that we're in. Tools and tech and all of those things are great. And, robo platform, all these things they're very good tools. And in the hands of the right people, fiduciary advisors that are skilled craftspeople, those tools can really improve things on the margin. But at the end of the day, this is always going to be, I think, I don't see tech replacing advisors. I see tech being able to enhance the way advisors work, but there is still always this one-on-one connection. And I think that story that you just told too really kind of humanizes. A lot of times people think these financial advisors we want to sound really smart and we want to use all these complex terms that confuse the heck out of people because it's more about status signaling, and we want people to think how bright we are, and that in some ways we want to confuse them so much that, they feel like they need to hire us, which is actually the exact opposite thing you want to do. And you touched on it before, is Woody Guthrie, I've often said this on the podcast, right? Said that, it's a simple thing, or it's simple to make things complex, but a true genius knows how to make the complex simple. And I think that comes down to that one-on-one interaction. And you're right. I think one of the most important things for advisors is, to figure out what is your story. And you hear Simon Sinek, find your why and whatnot, or start with your why. And I think that's really important. I'll give a quick little shout out. Holly Knight, who, I don't know if you know Holly, but she was down at the Wealth at Work conference in Nashville that we were both down at, and I think she's at Sapers and Wallach, I believe, is the name of her firm. But she's like their director of financial education, and she's built this really awesome using tech that she didn't build, but I think she uses WealthSense or something like that. But she's built this really cool experience, and I'm actually going to have her on the podcast in a couple of weeks, because when she talked about her story of, and just to give a little preview, like I think she was like homeless at one point in high school, and it's an incredible story that she has. And I was like, you have got to be on the podcast, because more people need to hear about, your story and how that has put you in a position to do the things that you do, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. I think, our industry is an interesting one where we're really impacting the lives of everyday working Americans. But from the outside looking in, most, the sort of the general public doesn't really understand what, they think financial services and they think Wall Street, and some of the movies that have probably not been in the greatest light. And so, I think that's one of the challenges.
There's a lot of George Clooney's, right, in the financial services industries, and not the good connotation of.
But I think that's a challenge. You're talking about, I've been incredibly fortunate and I'm very grateful for all of the support and mentorship and opportunities and luck that I've had to get to where I am, and I feel like we're just getting started. I mean, we have a strategy and vision for the future as well, but we are in an aging industry, and bringing in young professionals and young talent can be very difficult for us because of the image that financial services has. And when you go to a conference like, NAPA or Wealth at Work or others, and you hear the stories of a Holly Knight or others, you realize what an incredible, cohort of advisors there is that are the stewards of the work that we do. But, so going back to this sort of concept around Money Nav, we spend a lot of time looking at all the different solutions out there, all the different technology, and really believe that there wasn't something available today that aligned with our mission, with our values around financial advice, fiduciary advice to employees in the workplace. And so we embarked on this journey to build our own financial wellness platform that's called Money Nav. And over the course of 5-6 year period, created this platform that is a combination of technology driven, financial education, financial guidance, coupled with the human element, our team of financial coaches and consultants that build customized financial wellness programs for every one of our clients, and then deploy that in a way that matches the client's structure, the client's mission and internal culture, and deliver our services, our financial wellness through a number of different mediums. But I think the big differentiator on it, and the part that makes a difference, is the one-on-one financial coaching, is being able to sit down now over the course of the last several years with tens of thousands of different, employees, investors, and savers, and help chart out a strategy for them, not only to achieve and get on track for financial security and retirement, but to help them navigate the top goals and challenges and priorities that they have, and all these other money milestones or life milestones that will happen between today and the day they decide they're ready to cut back or ready to stop working.
And so, there is, let's talk a little bit about that and, this need for independent fiduciary advice for what I would kind of term the 97%. Michael Kitces, has cited a statistic before, something around the fact that like RIA, the traditional private wealth RIA firm, has done an incredible job delivering really leading edge wealth management, financial planning to about 3% of Americans, because quite frankly, they've got kind of the resources to pay the fees to hire these types of real specialists. But there's still 97% of people who either don't have, the means to be attractive to most really good kind of fiduciary advisors. And so the ability to bring planning to the masses. He was actually on my podcast. I think he was the third guest, and we talked about how 401k really could be kind of the beachhead, if you will, or the tip of the spear to bring planning to the masses. So talk a little bit about what you think, and there's this battle brewing within the industry, right? You've got private wealth firms that want to get into 401k. You've got retirement plan advisory firms that have these relationships with companies that want to start to get into the wealth management side. Then you factor in record keepers who, quite frankly, have been commoditized, I think, in a lot of ways over the past 10 or 15 years by guys like you and guys like me. And not that they don't play a valuable role, but that role has really been kind of diminished. As you said early on, you've become really the go-to fixer, trusted advisor for your clients. Like when they have an issue, they're picking up the phone and calling you. They're not calling the RM from, Fidelity or Vanguard or Empower. Probably not the first call. They're coming to you. And so you've got record keepers who've, between revenue sharing going away kind of in the industry, the move towards what I call the Vanguard effect, passive, lower fees, lack of kind of proprietary funds, squeezed margins. They've kind of gotten locked out over the past 10 or 15 years, but they're, I think, coming back with a vengeance. I tell a lot of advisors, like, they are playing the long game. You get an Empower that buys personal capital for $1 billion. Read an article a few months ago that said Fidelity was going to hire 4,000 CFPs, something along those lines. You've got Vanguard, who's trying to roll out advice, at a really low kind of price point, if you will. And so you've got all of these, what I would consider to be frenemies that are kind of like battling it out. And it's kind of like when you and I went to lunch that one day, right? Like we were there, we connected, it was very cordial. We kind of shared a little bit, but we were still a little bit guarded. That's what's happening right now in this battle to deliver wellness advice, financial planning to the masses. One of the things I'm frustrated about is I'm starting to hear a lot and read articles, but this idea of like who owns the participant, which I think I'm actually doing a video on it later today. I just think is really insulting. Nobody owns the participant, right? It's not the advisor. It's not the participant owns the participant. But there is this battle for how do you own the participant? How do you monetize the participant? That's another, comment that's often made. Talk about your perspective in terms of who. It stands to reason, guys like you and I, where we come from, that we think the advice industry, not the broad financial services record keeping, but the fiduciary advice industry is probably the best channel to be able to deliver planning to the masses. Talk a little bit about that and why you think that is and how you think advisors like you and others can coexist when you've got now record keepers that are basically going after, call it the same target market that you want to go after. Does that make sense?
Sure. Well, there's no question that I believe our model is the best delivery system for helping enhance retirement plans at an organizational level and then deliver fiduciary advice at the employee level. But it's not perfect because individuals are unique and have unique preferences. And I agree with you 100% that the phrase "who owns first of all, my buddy Joe DeNoyer and I hate that phrase participant. It just, I haven't used it for years. We call them employees or investors. Right. It's just such a disingenuous.
Words matter. That's the point, that words and phrases matter, right?
And so, I think that there's an environment where a firm like ours can deliver one-on-one coaching, guidance and advice to an organization and their employees, and that 401k plan can still access the education and advice services inside the record keeping system at a vendor or whomever that vendor is, because different individuals, different families are going to want to get this information in different ways. And part of our role as the fiduciary consultant at the plan will be to ensure that the committee, the fiduciaries of that plan who are working alongside us, understand the different roles and responsibilities that we have, that the vendor has, how that vendor is receiving compensation, and having a process to determine if that's, fair, reasonable, and aligned with what they want to deliver. I've always thought, that even going back to just this vendor analysis of comparing one vendor to another, I don't believe that there's anything inherently wrong with a vendor saying, if you use some of our investment vehicles, our record keeping expenses are going to be lower. Is that apples to apples with the purely open architecture vendor? No, absolutely not. But I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that, as long as everybody involved in that decision-making process recognizes the business model and the economics of how this process works. I think the part that becomes challenging or concerning is when it's difficult to disclose or document or undefined, or, if you go back to pre-2012, hidden, right? Where you just don't even know what these payments look like. But I also believe that there's going to be different service models for different advisory firms. There are really good advisory firms that, want to work on building the investment menu and creating advisor managed accounts and consulting on plan design. And they don't have the, either the teams or the interest to deliver financial education or financial wellness. So if they can partner with the right vendor or a third-party platform to do that, and they can manage the process and monitor it, that could be as efficient and valuable as a service model as a firm like ours coming in and doing it and providing the people and the resources and the experts to deliver it. I think there's enough opportunity. And there are varying business models and opinions of the companies and organizations that we serve, and disparities in where employees are located and how employees access information. All those things make a difference, and it's just kind of matching the pieces up. Is it going to become a battle, if you will? Yeah, I think for some period of time, for the next 2 years, it's shaking out in this way in which everybody's kind of clamoring over this one component of a retirement plan, which is getting access to the employee and their information. And so from our perspective, I always go back and try to center around that mission of how do we help people improve their financial know-how and get on track for their financial future. And we want to deliver that. We want to be compensated for doing that in a fair way. And if we always use that as really our litmus test, then it's a good way to keep us accountable, and that we're not taking advantage of. I think there's going to be more scrutiny over employee data and how that employee data. It's already starting, right? How that employee data is being used or misused, that in a way that's maybe seen as a prohibited transaction under ERISA.
I think that
this is a little bit of a rambling response there, but
no, I think that's I think that is a good point. And it goes back to, life is all about trade-offs, right? And understanding, having the what I would consider the kind of the strength of character and the courage to, excuse me, have these open conversations where, and that role of advisor, I do think that's a good point, is that it doesn't necessarily need to be a kind of a binary either or. It could be a both and. And in fact, there's probably an argument to be made for both and. I think my biggest concern is that, not everybody like you, Alex, and right, it's that's willing to kind of have that conversation with a plan sponsor who ultimately probably doesn't have the, call it, inside baseball to really be able to vet. They're getting, financial wellness. That sounds great, but not really. They're not in a position to know, well, how do we vet these different types of service providers, these different service offerings, the compensation associated with it and whatnot. And I think you bring up a really good point. Somebody has to be there. And being the fixer, the trusted advisor that you're probably the person there who can initiate and have those discussions and just make sure that everybody, most importantly, the plan sponsor who's making the decision whether to offer this to their employees, that they're in a position to understand what are the potential trade-offs, what are the potential, misalignment of incentives, and then figuring out a way to say, we know what the need is. Here's how we're going to source it, whether that's what we do, whether it's what the record keeper does, whether it's some type of combination of both. But ultimately, how do we make sure that everyone's incentives are aligned around that mission of provide the resources to employees based on their individual needs and circumstances. Is that fair?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
It'll be interesting to see. I agree with you. We saw in the Vanderbilt 403B case where the argument was really around participant data. Is that an asset? Mm-hmm. We've seen it in a couple of more cases, and courts so far have been pretty narrow in their interpretation. That ERISA talks about investments, but doesn't say anything about data, which is not surprising given that the regulation is 40 plus years old, almost 50 years old. Right. But I do think the DOL is probably going to chime in at some point.
Well, I think with this, cybersecurity guidance, I think that's going to be
absolutely,
a pathway for the DOL to be more involved in that conversation around how is data being used with respect to a plan or other things that are happening using the plan.
And that the Vanderbilt case, like one of the non-monetary settlement terms was that Vanderbilt Fidelity was the remaining record keeper, basically had to contractually ensure that they did not proactively reach out to participants using their data, that it was only a request. And so that, regardless of what the courts rule, I think that will be the trend is you'll get more plan sponsors that are actually contractually negotiating those agreements with their record keepers over time. It'll be interesting to see. How that plays out. So that these cases, these cases are pretty interesting. There's a lot of things that advisors can learn from these cases to have these types of conversations, with their clients. One of the things you mentioned that I thought was good was this idea of how are we compensated and how do we deliver our services profitably to clients? And we talked about ahead of time before we started recording, just your philosophy in terms of like, you don't peg necessarily a size plan per se, but it's really around, can we help and can we do it profitably? A lot of advisors are really good at working. We talked about this, working in the business. A lot of times they don't run great businesses in terms of they think just about revenue and not about profit, and profit is oxygen to a business. But you've got some thoughts around segmentation. And so, realizing that, you've got a number of plans, $100 million plus. That's a very different market. And I think you had said that kind of your target markets, call it maybe the 10 to, most of your plans fall in the 10 to, not to out you here, but $75 million space. That was basically Greenspring as well. We had, a number of really large plans. We also had plans under $10 million. But you're focused on delivering your services profitably while being able to make a difference for clients. So talk a little bit about how you think about segmentation of your client base and kind of matching up scope of services to, how you charge for that.
Well, we're fortunate today that we've built a really, really nice business. We have great client relationships. And so we can be very thoughtful about building new client relationships. And while most of our peers in this industry measure, our client relationships by asset size or number of employees, and those are really important metrics to think about when it comes to revenue and profitability. At the start of a, prospective client engagement, when we're going through that process, a lot of what we think about is how can we do the services we deliver really make a difference and add value to this organization and employees? And is there this match between that organization and their culture, their, I use that phrase over and over, mission, vision, and values with our mission, vision, and values. And so that has to be, connected today. Now, if you go back 16 years ago, as just you and I were both starting our practices, any organization that had a 401k plan, you would want to, try to get. If
they could fog a mirror, they were a good, were part of the target market. They were a good prospect. I remember those days.
Yeah. So today, most of our clients are in, about 60% of our clients are in either the nonprofit, trade association, charitable organization space, which has a big footprint in the greater DC Mid-Atlantic region, and then we have a large sort of second sector is in professional service firms, and then the remaining amount is somewhat broad, but they're all companies that kind of have that alignment. And so we want to make sure that the services we deliver and the quality and the client experience is consistent, whether you're a $400 million plan with 2,500 employees or a $14 million plan with 45 employees. So the services we deliver need to be consistent across that. But we also know that the 45-person company doesn't necessarily even want the same frequency of touch point as the $450 million 2,500 person company,
or has necessarily the complexity, right?
Right, or the needs. And so we think a lot about segmenting our clients across different service variations of our standardized service model. Right, we're thinking about everything as consistent, objective process around those sort of the way that I would describe it is, at a high level, we're working on three things: helping create, design, and maintain a retirement plan that aligns with the mission, vision, and values of an organization, working with that organization to navigate all the rules and regulations you have to follow when you're offering a retirement plan, and then finally, and most importantly, delivering a customized financial wellness and advice program that helps employees maximize the retirement benefit and improve their financial picture. Right. So that's
your starting point.
Yeah, that's the barrier to entry for us. We want to achieve these three things. If an organization says we only want two of the three, or we just want a low cost advisor, whatever it might be, then we're probably not a good fit. But then from there, we work to really build out a project plan, what we call our service plan, and structure it in a way that matches the delivery and frequency of those services up with the expectations and needs of those clients. And so it's segmented in a way that is driven by the service offering and service model. And at the end of the day, the compensation that we're earning. And as you sort of extrapolate that, the profitability and trying to maintain a certain degree of profitability. And we want to be very competitively priced. We benchmark our compensation using a third party on an annual basis for every client. And typically we want to fall somewhere in like the 50th to 75th percentile, so about somewhere between 50 to maybe 60 or 70% of other advisors are going to be a little lower cost than us. And it varies by client, but we're going to deliver a lot of value for that pricing model. And I extend this same view to the vendor relationships as what I kind of think and tell our client relationships is that, we want our vendor partners to be profitable. Our clients want us to be profitable because that ensures
you stick
that
around
when they have a special request, when they have, hey, Alex or Jim or Allison, the other consultants on our team, can you do this unique, special, custom thing for me? the answer is always going to be yes. And here's how, we can turn that around in a week or 2 weeks, because we have the resources, we have the human capital, we have the, investment back into our team to do that, as opposed to if we were running a business that was really just a volume, scalability, low cost business. And it was just, we're going to stick to this for everybody. So we do the segmenting in a way that we're matching up expectations and needs with the service offering, but it's still always based on that foundational. We're going to deliver this to every one of our.
So clients. It's about alignment. I think that's and for advisors listening, I think there's a lot of wisdom to take away from the way that not just Alex thinks about the process, but even the depth and quality of those conversations with with a prospective client, with a plan sponsor, with a company. That is just in hearing Alex, you kind of describe that. It's a very kind of simple, as you mentioned, kind of like plain English, down to earth, very understandable. Like, hey, that makes a lot of sense to do it that way. So I think great thoughts there. You mentioned human capital. So, as we kind of start to wrap up here, I've got a couple of more topics, but could you just touch on what, and you mentioned before that you've got this kind of this organizational vision. So, what are the top 2 or 3 priorities that you have for AFS 401k if you think about working on the business? And then and so maybe over the next, call it, 12, 18, 24 months. And then what are the 2 to 3 strategic priorities working in the business for clients, initiatives that you're trying to push forward with the client relationships that you have?
Sure. When we think of the team that we have today and the strategic initiatives over the next year plus, a few things are at a top priority for us. One is just continuing to create the opportunity and the culture internally for our team members to become the best version of themselves, both personally and professionally. And so that's a big challenge for an independent advisory firm, is to help create the path for somebody to progress from their first year to 3 years at our firm to being with us for 7, 10, 12 years.
Especially if they're not on the advisor track, because the advisor track is pretty.
The advisor track is the easiest one.
The non-advisor track, and that's what we struggled with at Greenspring, was how do you create career pathing for maybe people who aren't taking the advisor track.
But frankly, I think that the other roles on our team, somebody who's in charge, we have a director of financial wellness, we have a director of operations, we have client service associates, we have financial coaches. I have 2 people who specialize in digital media and content creation. And the team we have today is just, so amazing, especially over the last, now 20 months or so. Our ability to deliver for our clients and to continue to improve how we're working as advisors has just been really incredible. And so being able to maintain that for the long term is such an important piece of who we are and how we can actually execute and create awesome retirement plans for our clients. So I think about that a lot, is how do we provide somebody the opportunity to achieve their goals and really become the best version of themselves personally and professionally. And, as running an RIA firm, that becomes really challenging because there's no, we've tried to formalize training a bit, but, we certainly lean on the support of like NAPA as our industry association, of some of the other training platforms out there, and our DSTAT and vendor partners to help us and to help our team members continually enhance their education, continually become experts in different areas, so that we can always be, the right fit for our client relationships. And the second part of that is that as the role of an advisor expands, is being able to have the knowledge and expertise and resources to lead our clients in a lot of these different areas around strategic consulting and aligning all of their financial benefits together. We don't today do anything in the, medical, health, and welfare type benefits, but we're certainly getting involved in those conversations as a strategic partner to their benefits consultants. And we're absolutely getting involved in conversations around different financial benefits. The easy one that aligns with the benefits consultant is, the HSA,
Sure.
of course, as well as, thinking about other areas like student loan repayment programs, emergency savings vehicles. And so, that's this whole other area of strategic consulting that I think we're very well versed in, but I think it takes more time and energy to remain relevant and remain an expert in that space in comparison to the things that we've been doing for the last 16 years around fiduciary governance, right? So those are the two things. I mean, one is how do you cultivate the right this right ecosystem for your team and create the vision for the next several years so that we can get people who are in this world where professionals are changing, their employer every 2, 3, 4 years. How do we create consistency where we're building a buy-in to our vision so that our team members are going to love working at AFS because it gives them the path to be who they want to be in their life and be there for 10, 15, 20 years.
No, I think that's great. Just you can give a little shout out. So you're actually looking, I think I saw it on LinkedIn and I know I forwarded it to my network. You're actually looking to hire a couple of people, right? What roles are you trying to hire for?
So we're focused on growth. I mean, the one thing, and I say this in a humble way, but when you look at our team, we've continued to reinvest in human capital, and so some of the retort or criticism that you'll hear in the industry from advisory firms is that, well, financial wellness is not scalable, and so how do you can't really do it as an advisory firm, and I think that I would disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think you can, but you just have to invest in the right people, and you have to invest and reinvest in people. And so, we think a lot about the number of client relationships that a consultant is responsible for, the number of client relationships that we have a client service associate, which is an internal team member that's responsible for ongoing client service and coordination around that relationship, the number of of plans that they're responsible for. And so, we want to make sure that we are properly, if not even overstaffed, in a way to always deliver on our clients' expectations and hopefully surprise them and delight them in that service model.
So capacity building in a lot of ways is, I think, what you're talking about.
Yeah. So we're looking at to add a client service associate role, which would be a great position for a young professional who wants to get into this industry. Maybe they're coming out of college, or maybe they, didn't even go to college and they're just fascinated with financial services, and or just a really good person with a great head on their shoulders. It's a position that is one with great potential for growth and seeing all of the different aspects of what we do in this industry. And then the other position is another consultant role, having someone else on our team that is working alongside Jim, Alice, and myself and leading and managing client relationships. So we're in a great position that we're able to continue to grow. And that's, always one of the top initiatives that we have is to build new client relationships, but to do it in a way that's really intelligent around making sure that at our core, we're continuing to meet that mission, vision, and values and delivering for all of our clients that we have today.
Right. So if you're listening and one of those opportunities or roles sounds good, reach out to Alex. We'll have in the show notes ways to connect with them. I'm imagining LinkedIn.
Josh will get his.
There we go. Okay, well, I'm trying to get a little side hustle here, so I might take you up on that. So last just topic before we wrap up is there's a massive amount of M&A activity taking place in the industry. PE money is continuing to flow in. You've got in the retirement space the rise of everybody calls kind of the aggregators, right? Whether it's an incredible firm like a Cap Trust or One Digital, you've got Hub, you've got all these kind of roll up firms that are trying to build scale by acquiring really successful advisory firms. Multiples are off the charts right now. In particular, I think, and having been down at this conference with you in Nashville last week, and seeing the people coming up to talk, you were kind of like the belle of the ball, like anybody who could get AFS on their squad, I think would be lining up. I made the joke before we started recording that there were a couple of people that I think they would have like washed your car, cut your grass, picked up your dry cleaning for you if you would hook up and join with them. But so far, you've kind of resisted, whereas a lot of our peers are, for them, their own, personal situation and their companies, thinking, hey, this is a good path for us. For there could be many good reasons for that. You've resisted that so far. I'm sure you get a ton of overtures every week, every month. Why, when you're seeing this kind of convergence, this roll up, the dollars that are being thrown around obviously are significant. Why have you kind of resisted so far and remained or decided to remain independent?
Well, up until now, I've washed my own car, so that hasn't really been a need. It's a very interesting period. This sort of evolution over the last now couple of years, I think it's gone on for a few years and will probably persist for a few more, is natural in any maturing industry. And especially when you've had a really good economic environment. I mean, we're seeing this among our clients who are acquiring other companies or a couple who've been acquired. It's a natural, I think, process in a good economic market and as an industry matures. We're very happy with where we are today and the company that we've built and that we continue to build. There's no question that the consolidation you're seeing in this advisor space is very interesting, and I'm obviously paying a lot of attention to it, and trying to think strategically around what the next 7, 10, 15 years looks like in our industry and how to best position AFS for that period. You mentioned earlier, I'm 38, so I still have at least 2 more years to, hopefully be recognized as an under 40 advisor.
It's all downhill from there, Alex. It's all downhill from there.
My body, I already my body feels more sore and it's harder to keep in shape compared to just a couple of years ago. So, so I've got a longer time horizon, and I want to make sure we're being very, very smart and very thoughtful around what would be the best decision for our people, our team, and similarly our client relationships. How can we best serve those two groups, which are incredibly important to me? The people that have all the team members that work tirelessly for this mission every single day, and then the organizations and the employees inside those organizations that we serve. And I'm not definitive that one route or another is better, nor that staying in RIA is going to be the best path compared to joining a larger firm. And I totally respect the decisions that other advisors have made that can allow them to achieve their version of that goal. But today, we've been on this path for 16 years. I would be lying if I told you that the first, that it's all been, an easy path. I mean, the first 5 or 6 years, the degree of determination and discipline. And frankly, I owe a lot of the success to my business partner, who was my boss at the time, that he allowed for such a long runway. A lot of advisory firms, after a year or two of kind of trying to get something off the ground, would have just said, oh, you know what, we're not going to do it. It's not the right move for us. And so given all that history, we see our future and we have a strategic vision and think that we're just getting started with where we're taking this. And so perhaps that's one of the reasons we've been a little more measured in this process. And so, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. And at the end of the day, I think of myself as an entrepreneur, as somebody who's, a builder but I also think of myself as, an advisor to help more people than ever before that don't have access to a financial advisor. And that, again, that's kind of the center point of all the decisions we make. And so that'll be a big factor in any decision we make moving forward, as we sort of navigate this environment. And then lastly, I think it'll just be interesting to see it, you fast forward a year, 2, 3 years down the road, what other entrants are there into the market, whether on the record keeping side or the advisory side, that will continue to disrupt. I mean, I look back at how far we've come at AFS, and I constantly survey and look at, a lot of these advisors that are 27, 29, 30, 32 years old and are building incredible businesses, and maybe not yet on on a lot of people's radars. Right. I'm looking back at them, right, and saying, oh, like I got to go 110%. So these folks don't catch me, but it'll be interesting to see, because I think there's going to be more and more independent advisors emerge into the space who build, really incredible service models and businesses.
No, I think that's a really good take on the situation. And the great thing about this business is it's not, it's not a monopoly business like, Amazon, let's say, right, on the retail side. I mean, they're a lot of times you've heard about like M&A and convergence. The example I like to use is, when I started in the industry, I started at Morgan Stanley, and at the time there were, 10, 12 Wall Street firms. There may be 4 true Wall Street firms anymore, and they don't own the advice industry. That's what everybody said was kind of the convergence. Now, it can be really good firms. Like, I think that there's so much opportunity, as you said earlier, that's out there, that you're going to see the Cap Trusts and the One Digitals of the world continue to have tremendous success, and I think build really good firms. And as an advisor, it really comes down to, where do I feel like I can serve my clients best, and where do I feel like I can serve my team the best. But I agree with you. Like, I think I don't see aggregation and M&A and roll-ups as the death knell to independent firms. As a matter of fact, I think there will be plenty of potential clients out there that some are going to want the feeling of, call it, safety of a bigger firm, but others will actually want the exact opposite. They want the smaller, the nimble, the more customized, the Alexes and the AFSs of the world. So I think there's tremendous opportunity across multiple channels, kind of like you. And I think your measured approach is a good one. I mean, you've got a lot of room to run, and you're in this really good position that you've built something, to scale, if you will. And you've got a lot of opportunities ahead of you. The last question, I ask this to pretty much every guest, is what's the one piece of advice that you would give to other ERISA fiduciaries about how to be a better fiduciary?
It's a great question.
I only ask great questions, Alex.
Yeah. Well, there are a few that were throwaways, but that one was great. My view is that being genuine and honest and trying to build that with your clients so that they're being honest and genuine with you in these committee meetings around what it is that they either individually want to see or achieve, or collectively in representing an organization want to see and achieve. In a lot of cases, I think early on we would hold these meetings and try to walk through sort of this is what we should be doing, or this is what ERISA tells us to do, which you should follow, sure, obviously. But we weren't really having these real honest or open conversations about what were the challenges, what were the hurdles that those committees or organizations were facing. And I think if you're really genuine and honest about why you're doing the work that you're doing, and asking the committee members that you have the opportunity to work with to have that same approach, it opens up a lot of lenses around creating a better retirement plan and creating a plan that really meets the fiduciary responsibilities that we're all tasked to fulfill and deliver.
So if I could summarize what I heard you say there is kind of the why is more important than the what. The what isn't unimportant, but it's really the why behind it. So I think that's great advice. Where can people stay connected with you and with AFS 401k and what you guys are doing? What's the easiest way?
You find me on social, of course, is a good spot. LinkedIn and in particular Twitter. But AFS401k.com, moneynav.com, 2 sites to check out if you want to reach out or have other questions or feedback or disagree with everything I said and want to send me a love letter. You can do all that.
Awesome. Well, Alex, this has been a ton of fun. I think I have just a tremendous amount of respect for you within the industry and not just what you do, but a lot of the things you've done to give back to the industry and to our peers. And excited for your success to date, but also, I think what the future looks like for you and for the team at AFS is really, really bright. And just appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much for thinking of me and having me, Josh. It was awesome. I share that same respect with everything that you've done and you're doing. And I love the Fiduciary U podcast that you're rolling out. It's really been great.
Thanks so much.